Viernes Santo. When it came time to put on my Cucurucho tunic and hood, the wife took a bunch of Facebook photos of me before sending me off to catch up with the procession. I hurried down the road a bit clumsily because I have a long stride that doesn't suit robes. The crowds were thick at First Avenue, on every block, a little tough to push through, but I liked it that way. It's nice to see so many people united in something positive like faith. I called my father-in-law to ask where he was, and he told me a few blocks up. I hurried up the road, trying not to step on alfombras or push anybody walking solemnly. I always get nervous that I'll be in the wrong place when it's my turn, like those bad dreams you have as a kid. I end up hurrying past all the alfombras and not enjoying them. My father-in-law, Ricardo, was not hard to find. He may have been dressed just like everyone else, in black robe with a hood, but he towers over everyone. Guatemalans are for the most part small people. The indigenous especially are tiny, mostly coming to a whopping 4 feet tall. Ricardo stands more than 1 head taller than me. Great guy. Looks like an ogre, which was a bit unnerving when I first met him. All he was missing was a single tusk jutting up out of his lower lip, and he'd be perfect for a fairy tale movie. I remember seeing him the first time and thinking, man, I better not piss off his daughter. I said hi to him and gave him a hug, and felt the phone in my pocket buzzing. It took a minute to fish it out of my robes, even though it had a hole for me to reach in my pocket for just such an occasion. When I looked at the display, my heart leaped. A text from Ariana. "Excuse me," I said, hanging back among the cucuruchos with the swinging thuribles and the billowing smoke. "Hi," she wrote. "Can I have a table at 8:30 for me and 3 friends?" Wait a minute, I thought. Don't respond too quickly. No, screw that. Of course, I wrote back immediately. I'll call the restaurant. I'm out being a cucaracha right now. Cucurucho! I sent back a winking, smiling face, pleased with myself for making her laugh, and called to ask my waiter to hold a table. "Are you carrying?" she asked while I was on the phone. "Yep, Escuela de Cristo." "Very good," she said. It always impresses Chapines that I get involved in these kinds of things. I put my phone away, made small talk with Ricardo, and admired the alfombras that would soon be trampled underfoot. We moved slowly forward in this march I vaguely remember from another life, like a half-remembered dream. It was as if I had always been here, not quite knowing what I was doing, walking with a bunch of people robed in black, feeling somewhat like a lemming. In this life, though, I love the feeling of solemn camaraderie I share with thousands of strangers, all of us united in something we do to demonstrate our faith. So I don't like going to Mass or believe in exorcisms. It's not about that. Just throwing that in there before you call me a hypocrite over what I wrote earlier. Anyway, we arrived at my station and waited. Ricardo was a popular man, so we were greeted many times by people passing by. I was introduced to gentlemen he knew since he was a boy, kids he'd played with that were now the owners of strong businesses, and they were pleased to see me dressed like them. Eventually, the man bearing a large crucifix appeared, with cucuruchos following with black banners and standards engraved with Christ's final words and pronouncements. Behind them, sculptures of the archangels, the stations of the cross, and the apostles were carried by 4 men at a time. We waited. Finally, the cloud of smoke appeared, the ominous drum announcing the approach of Jesus in his coffin. We watched it gradually take shape, the grayer shadow within the gray billowing out of the swinging thuribles. How many photos are snapped from that moment, only to be deleted later because they show nothing? Hundreds of people watching their lives through the screen of a camera phone instead of with their own eyes, all of them trying to preserve a moment instead of experience it. The float came on like a warship in morning fog, the drum keeping pace for rowing slaves. I checked the card I'd pinned to the breast of my robe for the 5th time, as if I may possibly have forgotten my number in the last 2 minutes. "I am on the correct side, right?" I asked my father-in-law again, and he peered down at me with a quiet smile. "Yes, son, you're still on the right side. You've been here the whole time. Relax." I don't know why I always get nervous right before it's my turn. Maybe everybody does, except Ricardo. It's at moments like this that I wish Ricardo had been my dad, a real man who knows what's going on, and then maybe I'd be a real man like his son, Ricardo Jr., instead of a 35-year-old boy. Shut up, brain, I thought. The massive float appeared, 100 men grunting under the weight of it. It was elaborately carven with filigree that must have taken all year, the most intricate patterns in the dark wood. Above that, orchids nodded at the feet of the apostles. Behind them, I glimpsed a gold-worked glass coffin and a hint of red from Christ's robe. I might get to see the whole thing later in all its glory, but it was starting to get dark. Since we're in a valley created by volcanoes, the sun goes down pretty fast. Slowly, it arrived at our stop, and we all crowded forward looking for our spots. Pushing as courteously as one can, I got to number 63 and tapped a tired man on the shoulder. It reminds me of Indiana Jones trying to measure out sand, then pass a heavy pouch for a golden idol every time we trade places and I slip under that massive float. The weight of it on my shoulder suddenly woke me up to the reality of what I was doing. If I should stumble, the whole thing could come crashing down, and I would be remembered for years as the loser who couldn't hack it. Or maybe it would not, but it sure felt that way. It's a stark reminder of just how much is riding on me at that restaurant, and here I am coasting along, blowing it off while riding women on top of tables after hours, texting girls instead of tallying up the sales and costs. I felt this way every year that I carried. We started plodding clumsily along, trying not to kick the heels of the man in front of us, trying not to linger too long in our steps and be kicked by the men behind us, trying not to go too fast and screw it up the pace for everybody. With every step, our outside hips ached with the pressure. I listened to the man behind me grunting with the strain, and I straightened my back a little to move the float maybe a millimeter higher and take even a smidgen off the weight of his oven. Then I wondered if I had put more weight on some other poor guy. Then I wondered if everybody was wondering these things, or were they just doing what they always did and I was the only weirdo. Christ, these things are heavy. Why do I have to do this, I wondered. Is it the only way I can feel something, besides having affairs and gambling with my life? The only way I feel alive and in the moment? Because you sure can't daydream while carrying this thing. I looked at the audience while we slowly passed. A throng of men and women looking up with adoring eyes at Jesus in his coffin, crossing themselves and kissing their fingers. I'd always wait for them to toss their fingers away and say perfecto after, but they never do. It is nice to see the love in their eyes. It's a sea of devoted faces, and it makes me happy. We trampled alfombras and choked on the smoke, grunting under the crushing weight, and loved every moment of it. And when it seemed like we could not go on another moment, the signal was given for us to stop and move backwards, swaying the float from side to side. I kept slipping and kicking the heel of the guy in front of me, and the one behind me kicked mine. The orchestra, watching behind us, belted out their resounding dirge, and it must have been breathtaking for the people to see. I looked at the scimitar of a moon, startled that night had fallen while we were watching the cobblestones, straining our eyes to keep from treading on uneven ground. Jesus, my hip and shoulder hurt. Finally, a tide of black-robed men on the sidelines surged forward, and gloved hands touched our shoulders to take our places. I slipped out from under the weight and backed up to look at what I had carried. I'd been right under the coffin, and it was lit up from the inside. It was beautiful. Really, whether you're a believer or not, the artistry of it is amazing. I watched it pass, listening to the musicians who followed, and then hugged my father-in-law who'd appeared at my side. "Vamos?" he asked. I nodded, and we made our way to the nearest, least crowded corner to hurry back to work. I fished a cigarette out of my pocket, offering it to him, and he made that yes-no tilting of his head before accepting. He had quit almost as many times as I had, but this was a special occasion. I got a second one for myself, and we paused to light them, and then shot off down the darkened street as fast as our robes would allow. I wanted to check my phone to see if Ariana had written, but didn't dare in front of Ricardo. He was one of those men who could put on a dumb guy act while reading your entire guilty conscience at a glance. This was my favorite part of Holy Week. This moment, us hurrying back to work after carrying. The pain had become an endorphin rush, and the air crackled with electricity from all the people united in a common happiness. I glanced up at the moon again and smiled. I've always prayed to the moon, ever since I was a kid, so when I look up at it, I see the face of God. We passed my ice cream shop, happy to see it overflowing with customers, and pushed our way to the corner of Central Park. There was hardly room to breathe, much less pass through the crowd, but the people grudgingly gave way, and we finally made it into the restaurant. The place was packed. Instantly, I was sweating from the heat of all the bodies inside, but I kept my robe and hood on, because it kept the diners happy. I went in smiling at every table, stopping to ask if everything was all right, and they all asked the same question. "Did you carry?" I answered with the same flushed smile and excused myself to the next table, finally making it to the kitchen. My wife was in the window asking my cooks what the holdup was. "There you are," she said, as if I'd been playing hooky. "An asshole in the garden, table 5, is demanding he get his dinner free because he waited so long." Sigh. "How long?" "Almost an hour." I kissed her on the cheek and went to go apologize. On the way, I passed the table that was supposed to be reserved for Ariana. It was full of people who weren't her or her friends, and they hadn't even gotten their food yet.